My son Bradley stood in the mahogany-paneled law office, his $1,000 suit perfectly pressed, that same cruel smirk he'd inherited from his mother spreading across his face. "You get $5, Dad," he announced, savoring each word like expensive wine. "Mom made sure of that." I sat quietly in my worn leather jacket, hands folded, watching him gloat about the $42 million fortune he was about to inherit. The lawyer cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and turned to the next page. The smirk on Bradley's face reminded me of Eleanor the day she served me divorce papers 10 years ago. Same cold calculation in the eyes, same slight upturn at the corner of the mouth that said they knew something you didn't. I shifted in my chair, the leather creaking under my weight, and let my mind drift back to better days before everything went wrong. 25 years of marriage doesn't disappear overnight, though Eleanor certainly tried to make it seem that way. We'd met at Northwestern University when I was finishing my teaching degree, and she was already blazing through her MBA program. Back then, she loved that I wanted to teach high school history, said it was noble that I'd be shaping young minds. Funny how noble became pathetic in her vocabulary once the pharmaceutical money started rolling in. Bradley was born on a snowy Chicago morning in December, and for 5 years we were the family everyone envied. Eleanor climbed the corporate ladder at Celestial Pharmaceuticals, while I taught at Lincoln Park High School. We had a modest house in Evanston, Saturday morning pancakes, and dreams of growing old together. Then Eleanor got her first executive promotion, and something shifted. The changes came gradually. Late nights became overnight business trips. Weekend family time turned into networking events I wasn't invited to. She started making comments about my teacher's salary, about the cars other executives' spouses drove about private schools Bradley should attend. When Bradley turned 15, Eleanor didn't come home for his birthday. She was closing a deal in Switzerland that would net her a $2 million bonus. That was the night she called to say she wasn't coming back. "I've outgrown this life, Melvin," she'd said over the phone, voices echoing in the background of some fancy restaurant. "I need someone who matches my ambition." The divorce was swift and brutal. Eleanor's lawyers descended like vultures, picked our life clean. She got the house, the investments, most of our savings. I got Bradley and enough money to rent a 2-bedroom apartment near the school. The judge said it was fair, considering the income disparity. Eleanor didn't even show up for the custody hearing. For 5 years, it was just Bradley and me. I coached his baseball team, helped with homework at the kitchen table, made sure he had everything he needed, even if it meant I wore the same shoes for 3 years. He was a good kid, angry at his mother but working through it. We had Thursday night pizza, Saturday morning runs along Lake Michigan, and long talks about history and life. I thought we were solid. Bradley graduated high school. With honors, went to college on a partial scholarship I supplemented by taking summer school teaching jobs. He'd call every Sunday, come home for holidays, still wore the Cubs cap I bought him for his 16th birthday. When he graduated with a finance degree, I was the proudest father in that auditorium. Then 3 months ago, everything I thought I knew shattered. We were having dinner at our usual spot, Giuseppe's on Clark Street, when Bradley mentioned he'd been to the opera the previous week. "Since when do you like opera?" I asked, twirling spaghetti on my fork. "Since Mom started taking me," he said casually, not meeting my eyes. The fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "Your mother." That's when it all came out. 5 years of deception laid bare over plates of cooling pasta. Bradley had reconnected with Eleanor during his sophomore year of college. Secret meetings at first, then regular dinners, then weekend trips to her estate in Lake Forest. She'd been funding his lifestyle, introducing him to her world, and slowly, methodically turning him against me. She told me things, Dad. Bradley said, his voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before. About how you held her back, how you were content with mediocrity, how you made her feel guilty for wanting more. And you believed her. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Look at the evidence." He gestured around the small restaurant with its checkered tablecloths and ancient jukebox. "This is your idea of fine dining. Mom took me to Paris last month. Do you even have a passport?" The transformation was complete, but I'd been too blind to see it happening. The designer clothes I'd attributed to good thrift store finds. The new confidence I'd thought came from job success. The subtle comments about my apartment, my car, my life. All seeds Eleanor had planted watered with money and privilege. "There's something else," Bradley said, pulling out his phone to check the time. That's when I saw it. A Patek Philippe watch easily worth more than I made in 2 years. "Nice watch," I said quietly. "Early inheritance gift from Mom." He smirked that Eleanor smirk. "She's been generous. Did you know she helped me during your divorce? I was 18 by then, legally an adult. I helped her move some assets offshore before the settlement. She said it was only fair, keeping it in the family." The restaurant seemed to tilt. My son, the boy I'd raised alone, had helped his mother hide money that should have provided for his education, our life together. "Why are you telling me this now?" I managed to ask. "Because Mom's sick. Pancreatic cancer stage 4. She's got maybe a month." He signaled for the check. "Her lawyers are handling everything, and I wanted you to know where you stand. Or rather, where you don't stand. Bradley, I'm sorry about your mother, but save it." He threw down a $100 bill without waiting for change. "She's leaving everything to me. The houses, the portfolios, the overseas accounts. $42 million, Dad. And you get exactly what you gave her in terms of ambition and success. Nothing." He stood to leave, then paused. "Actually, that's not true. Her lawyer called today. She's leaving you $5. Said it was for the coffee you bought her on your first date with interest." The cruelty of it took my breath away. Not just Eleanor's final insult, but Bradley's enjoyment in delivering it. "When's the reading?" I asked. 3 weeks. Don't feel obligated to come. It'll just be embarrassing for you." He walked out, leaving me alone with 2 cups of cold coffee, and 25 years of memories turned to ash. I sat there for another hour trying to understand how the baby I'd held in that hospital room, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, had become this stranger in an expensive suit. The waiter, Antonio, who'd known us for years, approached tentatively. "Everything okay, Mr. Melvin?" "Just life, Antonio," I said, managing a weak smile. "Just life catching up with me." I left the restaurant and walked for hours through the Chicago streets, where I'd pushed Bradley's stroller, taught him to catch snowflakes on his tongue, showed him the beauty in a simple life lived well. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost him to the shimmer of his mother's world. But as I walked, I remembered Eleanor's voice on that last phone call from Switzerland. Cold, dismissive, certain. Bradley had sounded exactly the same tonight. The apple, as they say, doesn't fall far from the tree. What I didn't know then, walking through the crisp Chicago night, was that sometimes trees can surprise you. Sometimes they bear fruit you never expected. And sometimes, just sometimes, what looks like an ending is actually a beginning in disguise. 3 weeks. 3 weeks until the will reading that Bradley was so certain would be my final humiliation. 3 weeks to prepare for whatever came next. I pulled my jacket tighter against the wind coming off the lake and headed home to my small apartment, unaware that Eleanor had already set in motion events that would change everything I thought I knew about winning, losing, and the true cost of a parent's love. The call came at 6:43 on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks before the will reading. I was grading papers at my kitchen table, trying to focus on my students' essays about the Great Depression, when my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. "Melvin." The voice was thin, labored, but unmistakably Eleanor's. "Eleanor," I set down my red pen. "Bradley told me about your diagnosis. I'm sorry." A bitter laugh turned into a cough. "Are you after everything?" "I wouldn't wish cancer on anyone, not even you." Silence stretched between us, filled with years of unspoken words. Finally, she spoke again. "I need to see you. Today. There are things you need to know." "I don't think that's a good idea." Bradley made it clear. "Forget Bradley." The sharpness in her voice cut through her weakness. "Northwestern Memorial Hospital, room 412. 2 o'clock. Don't tell anyone you're coming, especially not Bradley." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone, then at my stack of ungraded papers. My first instinct was to ignore her. What could Eleanor possibly have to say after 10 years of silence? But something in her voice, a note of desperation I'd never heard before, made me reconsider. I called in sick for my afternoon classes, something I rarely did, and drove to the hospital. Northwestern Memorial rose like a glass monument to modern medicine, all gleaming surfaces and efficiency. The contrast between this and the community clinic where I got my checkups couldn't have been starker. Room 412 was at the end of a hushed corridor that screamed expensive private care. I knocked softly and entered. The woman in the bed bore little resemblance to the Eleanor I remembered. Cancer had whittled her down to sharp angles and translucent skin. But her eyes, those calculating green eyes, remained unchanged. "You came," she said, gesturing weakly to a chair beside her bed. "You asked." I sat down, noticing the array of machines monitoring her failing body. "What's this about Eleanor?" She studied me for a long moment. "You look the same. A little grayer maybe, but essentially unchanged. Do you know what I see when I look in the mirror now? Eleanor. Death, Melvin. I see death. And with death comes clarity." She reached for a water cup with trembling hands. I helped her take a sip. "I've done terrible things. Made choices that... Well, the bill always comes due, doesn't it?" "If this is about the will, Bradley already told me. $5, your little joke." "Is that what he said?" Something flickered across her face. "Of course he did. My son, my creation. I made him in my image, didn't I? Cold calculating, always looking for the angle." "He's not all bad," I said, surprising myself by defending him. "There's still good in him." "You always were too generous." She pressed a button on her bed control, sitting up straighter. "That's why I called you. Because despite everything, you're the only truly decent person I've ever known." "Eleanor, what's going on?" She gestured to a Louis Vuitton bag on the nightstand. "In the inside pocket, there's a USB drive. Take it." I found the drive small and black, unremarkable. "What is this?" "Evidence. 3 years' worth of evidence about Celestial Pharmaceutical's Project Serenity." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "We killed people, Melvin. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Covered up trial results, bribed FDA officials, falsified data, all for a drug that we knew caused heart failure in 12% of users." The room seemed to close in around me. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Bradley was involved." Tears, the first I'd ever seen from Eleanor, traced paths down her sunken cheeks. "I brought him in 2 years ago. Thought I was giving him opportunity, teaching him the business. Instead, I corrupted my own son. He took to it like I did. Eagerly, he was the one who suggested destroying the original trial data." I stared at the USB drive in my hand. "If this is true, you need to go to the authorities." "With what time?" She gestured at the machines. "Besides, they'd never believe a dying woman trying to clear her conscience. But you, Melvin, you're a teacher. People trust teachers. And more importantly, you'll do what's right even if it costs you." "Costs me what I have nothing to lose." "That's where you're wrong." She gripped my hand with surprising strength. "The will, Melvin. It's not what Bradley thinks. I changed it last week." Before I could process this, the door burst open. A man in a gray suit entered, his bearing screaming law enforcement despite the civilian clothes. "Mrs. Henderson, I told you no visitors without clearing them first." his eyes fixed on me, cataloging every detail. "This is my ex-husband, Thomas," Eleanor said smoothly. "Surely I'm allowed to make peace before I die." The man, Thomas, studied me for another moment before stepping back outside. Through the closing door, I glimpsed another figure in the hallway, someone who quickly turned away. "Who was that?" I asked. "Thomas Brennan, private investigator. He's been helping me with certain matters." Eleanor's energy was fading. "Listen carefully. I don't have much time. The USB contains everything, but it's encrypted. The password is our anniversary date, followed by Bradley's birthday. Do what's right, Melvin. Not for me, but for all those families who lost someone because of our greed." "Eleanor, I can't. This would destroy Bradley." "He's already destroyed." The words came out harsh, but her expression softened. "But maybe he can be rebuilt. You did it once, raising him after I left. Perhaps." The door opened again. This time it was Bradley, his face flushed with anger. "What are you doing here?" "Your mother called me," I said, slipping the USB into my jacket pocket. "She wanted to say goodbye." "Get out." Bradley moved between us, blocking my view of Eleanor. "You have no right to be here. She's my mother." "Bradley, please," Eleanor said weakly. "I asked him to come." "I don't care. He doesn't belong in our world." Bradley's voice rose. "Did you tell him about the will? Did you promise him something? Is that why you're here? Dad hoping to guilt money out of a dying woman?" The accusation stung more than any physical blow could have. "You know me better than that." "I thought I did. Then I learned what Mom told me about the divorce, about how you tried to sabotage her career, how you—" "Stop!" Eleanor's voice, though weak, commanded attention. "Bradley, I lied. About all of it. Your father never did any of those things. I said them because I needed you to choose me, and I knew you wouldn't if you knew the truth." Bradley's face went through a series of expressions, finally settling on denial. "You're confused. The medications—" "I've never been clearer." Eleanor reached for him, but he stepped back. "Melvin, go, please. And remember what I said about doing what's right." I stood to leave, pausing at the door. "Goodbye, Eleanor." "Goodbye, Melvin. Take care of our son." The weight of the USB drive in my pocket felt heavier with each step away from her room. In the elevator, I passed Thomas Brennan again. He gave me a slight nod, as if he knew exactly what I was carrying. It wasn't until I reached my car that I realized my hands were shaking. Eleanor Henderson, the woman who'd torn my life apart, had just handed me the power to destroy her empire and potentially send our son to prison. The Great Depression essays would have to wait. I had a much darker chapter of history to uncover. That night alone in my apartment, I plugged in the USB drive. The password worked, and file after file of damning evidence filled my screen. Clinical trial reports with death counts highlighted, email chains discussing cover-ups, financial records showing bribes, and Bradley's name appearing more and more frequently as the dates grew recent. I was still reading when my phone rang at 3 a.m. Bradley's number. "She's gone," he said, his voice empty. "She died an hour ago." "I'm sorry, Bradley." "No, you're not. And neither am I, really. She was a complicated woman." He paused. "The lawyers want to meet next week for the will reading. Try to dress appropriately, will you? I don't want you embarrassing me in front of the partners." The line went dead. I looked back at the screen at an email Bradley had written suggesting they increase lobbying efforts to prevent FDA oversight. My son, the boy I'd taught to always tell the truth, had become a master of deadly lies. Eleanor's final words echoed in my mind. Do what's right. But what was right when it meant destroying your own child? I had 1 week to decide. 1 week to determine if justice was worth losing my son forever. Outside my window, Chicago slept peacefully, unaware of the storm about to break. Somewhere in the city, families were mourning loved ones who died trusting a medication that Celestial Pharmaceuticals knew was deadly. They deserved justice. But Bradley was still my son. I closed the laptop and made coffee. It was going to be a very long week. The law offices of Hartman and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of a building that scraped the Chicago sky. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing my only good suit, the one I'd bought for parent-teacher conferences 5 years ago. The security guard in the marble lobby looked at me like I'd wandered in by mistake. Melvin Patterson for the Henderson estate, reading I Said, trying not to feel out of place among the lawyers and executives, streaming through the turnstiles. He checked his list twice before issuing me a visitor's badge. 42nd floor. Elevators are to your right. The elevator was all brushed steel and hidden speakers playing classical music. I recognized Chopin Eleanor's favorite composer. She used to play his nocturnes while studying for exams, said they helped her think clearly. Strange the details that stay with you. When the doors opened on 42, I stepped into a world of hushed voices and deep carpets. The receptionist, a young woman with perfectly styled hair, directed me to Conference Room A. Through glass walls, I could see they'd already gathered. Bradley stood at the window, his back to the door, surveying the city below, like he already owned it. Beside him, a blonde woman in a red dress checked her phone with the bored expression of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. That would be Cynthia, the girlfriend he'd mentioned in passing. 3 men in identical dark suits huddled around a table, reviewing documents. Business associates I assumed here to witness Bradley's triumph. I entered quietly, but Bradley sensed my presence immediately. He turned that practiced smile, faltering for just a moment when he saw my suit. "Dad, you came." He didn't move to greet me. "Everyone, this is my father, Melvin. He teaches high school." The way he said it, like he was apologizing for my existence, sparked anger I quickly suppressed. This wasn't the time. "Mr. Patterson." One of the suits extended a hand. "Gregory Walsh, CFO of Celestial. Bradley's told us so much about you." "I'll bet he has," I thought, shaking the offered hand. The blonde Cynthia glanced up from her phone long enough to give me a dismissive once-over before returning to whatever held her attention. The other 2 suits introduced themselves as members of Celestial's board there to support Bradley during this transition. "Gentlemen, ladies." A deep voice commanded attention from the doorway. "If we could take our seats, we'll begin." James Hartman looked exactly like what Central Casting would send if you ordered prestigious estate lawyer. Silver hair, impeccable, grooming an air of authority that filled the room. He took his place at the head of the conference table, setting down a leather portfolio. "First, let me express my condolences on the loss of Eleanor Henderson. She was a remarkable woman and a valued client of this firm for over 20 years. He opened the portfolio, revealing a thick document. "We're here today for the reading of her last will and testament executed 6 days before her passing." 6 days. Bradley's voice sharpened. "Her previous will was dated 2 years ago." "Indeed." Hartman's expression revealed nothing. "Mrs. Henderson made several significant changes in her final days, all properly witnessed and notarized, I assure you." "This is highly irregular," one of the board members interjected. "Eleanor would have consulted us about any major changes to her estate planning." "With respect, Mr. Davies, Mrs. Henderson was under no obligation to consult anyone regarding her personal assets." Hartman adjusted his reading glasses. "Shall we proceed?" Bradley dropped into a chair across from me, his jaw tight. Cynthia took the seat beside him, finally putting away her phone. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. "I, Eleanor Marie Henderson, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament revoking all previous wills and codicils." Hartman's voice took on the formal cadence of legal ritual. "To my son, Bradley Thomas Henderson, I leave the sum of $5 to be paid from my checking account at First National Bank of Chicago." The silence that followed was absolute. Bradley's face went through a series of colors from red to white to an unhealthy gray. "That's impossible," he said finally. "There must be a mistake." There's no mistake, Mr. Henderson. Shall I continue? This is ridiculous. Bradley slammed his palm on the table. She has $42 million in assets. The houses, the portfolios, the offshore accounts. Which brings us to the primary beneficiary. Hartman turned the page with deliberate slowness. To my former husband, Melvin James Patterson, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including, but not limited to, all real property financial instruments, business interests, and personal effects. The words hit me like a physical blow. Around the table, chaos erupted. Bradley was on his feet shouting about undue influence and mental incompetence. The board members were demanding to see documentation. Cynthia was already on her phone, probably calling her lawyer. I sat frozen, unable to process what I'd just heard. However, Hartman's voice cut through the noise. There is a condition. The room quieted again, all eyes on the lawyer. Mr. Patterson's inheritance is contingent upon him completing a specific task within 30 days of this reading. He must deliver to the appropriate authorities all evidence of criminal wrongdoing by Celestial Pharmaceuticals related to Project Serenity, including but not limited to falsified trial data bribery of federal officials and conspiracy to commit fraud, resulting in multiple deaths. My hand moved involuntarily to my jacket pocket, where the USB drive sat like a lead weight. If Mr. Patterson fails to complete this task or chooses not to accept it, the entire estate reverts to Bradley Henderson. This is insane. Bradley's face was purple with rage. My mother would never. Your mother left a video message to be played at this time. Hartman produced a tablet, setting it on the table. Would you like to see it? Without waiting for an answer, he pressed play. Eleanor appeared on the screen, clearly filmed in her hospital bed. She looked directly at the camera at us, her green eyes still sharp despite her body's betrayal. If you're watching this, then I'm gone, and you're all probably very confused. Bradley, my son, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. I raised you to expect this inheritance, groomed you to take over my life's work. But somewhere along the way, I realized I wasn't creating a successor. I was creating a monster, just like me. Bradley made a sound like he'd been punched. The money I'm leaving to Melvin isn't a gift. It's a burden. With it comes the responsibility to undo the harm we've caused. Yes, Bradley, I know you think you were just following my lead, but you embraced the corruption eagerly, even suggested new ways to hide our crimes. The student surpassed the teacher. On screen, Eleanor paused to catch her breath, the effort of speaking clearly exhausting her. Melvin, I chose you because you're the only person I've ever known who would choose justice over wealth. You raised our son with values I systematically destroyed. This is my attempt at redemption, though I know it's too little too late. The evidence I gave you is complete. Use it. Save the lives we put at risk. And maybe save our son from becoming irredeemably lost. The video shifted slightly, someone adjusting the camera. Bradley, the $5 isn't an insult. It's the exact amount Melvin spent on coffee for our first date 37 years ago. He insisted on paying, even though he could barely afford it, because he said a man should be able to buy a woman a cup of coffee. It was the last truly honest gesture anyone ever made for me. Everything after was tainted by ambition and greed. She looked directly at the camera one final time. Do better, both of you. The money means nothing. The truth means everything. The screen went dark. In the silence that followed, I could hear the hum of the air conditioning, the distant sound of traffic 42 floors below. I'll sue, Bradley said quietly, dangerously. Mental incompetence, undue influence. This will never stand up in court. You're welcome to try, Hartman said mildly. However, Mrs. Henderson anticipated this response. She underwent a complete psychiatric evaluation 4 days before executing this will. 3 independent psychiatrists confirmed her mental capacity. She also had no contact with Mr. Patterson between the time she decided to change her will and her death, which eliminates any question of undue influence. The hospital. Bradley seized on this. He visited her at the hospital. I saw him there, after the will was already executed and witnessed. That meeting has no bearing on its validity. Bradley turned to me then, and the hatred in his eyes made me flinch. You did this. Somehow you manipulated her. Bradley, I had no idea. Shut up! He was around the table before anyone could react, grabbing my jacket. You think you've won? You think you can waltz in here and take what's mine? Mr. Henderson, Hartman's voice cracked like a whip. I'll remind you that assault is a criminal offense. Security is already on their way. Sure enough, 2 uniformed guards appeared at the conference room door. Bradley released me, stepping back, but his eyes never left mine. 30 days, he said softly. You have 30 days to throw away our family's future on some misguided crusade. When you fail, and you will fail, everything comes to me. And I'll make sure you get nothing. Not even the $5. He stormed out, Cynthia trailing behind. The board members followed, muttering about emergency meetings and damage control. In moments, the conference room contained only Hartman and me. Congratulations, Mr. Patterson, the lawyer said dryly. You're potentially one of the wealthiest men in Chicago, or will be if you complete Eleanor's task. I don't understand any of this. Few do when life changes so dramatically. He closed the portfolio and stood. A word of advice, your son is not going to accept this quietly. Eleanor knew that. It's why she hired security for you. Security? They'll contact you within the hour. I'd strongly suggest accepting their protection. He moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Patterson, Eleanor left something else for you. Not part of the official estate. He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Eleanor's distinctive handwriting. What is it? I couldn't say. She gave it to me with instructions to deliver it only after the will was read. Good day, Mr. Patterson, and good luck. I suspect you'll need it. I sat alone in the conference room, holding the envelope, my mind reeling. Through the glass walls, I watched office life continue around me, oblivious to the bomb that had just exploded in mine. $42 million. But only if I destroyed my son. I opened Eleanor's envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper with just one line. The truth will set you free, but first it will destroy everything you think you know. Be ready. E. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Patterson, this is Marcus Washington from Sentinel Security. We need to meet immediately. Your life is in danger. I looked out at the Chicago skyline, at the city I'd called home my entire life, and realized nothing would ever be the same. Eleanor had given me wealth beyond my wildest dreams, but the price might be my son's soul. And based on that text, possibly my life. 30 days. I had 30 days to decide what kind of man I really was. The knock on my apartment door came at 11:23 that night. 3 sharp raps, a pause, then 2 more. Just like the text had instructed. Through the peephole, I saw a mountain of a man in a black suit, hands clasped in front of him like a Secret Service agent. Mr. Patterson, Marcus Washington, Sentinel Security. We spoke earlier. I opened the door, and Marcus filled the entire frame. 6'4", built like a linebacker with intelligent eyes that swept my apartment in a single, comprehensive glance. Mr. Washington, I appreciate you coming, but I think there's been some misunderstanding. I don't need— With respect, sir, you do. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. May I— Before I could respond, he was checking windows, examining locks, even looking behind picture frames. Professional, methodical, thorough. Your ex-wife hired us 2 weeks ago. He said, running his fingers along the window frame in my living room. Paid for 6 months of protection, non-refundable. Said you'd resist at first. Eleanor knew I'd resist bodyguards. She knew you, period. Marcus turned from the window. This lock's been tampered with, recently. You had any unexpected visitors? No, I stopped. Wait. My neighbor mentioned seeing maintenance here yesterday, but I didn't call anyone. Marcus pulled out his phone, typed rapidly. We need to relocate you. Pack essentials for a week. Only what you can carry. This is ridiculous. I'm a high school teacher. Nobody's trying to... The window behind Marcus exploded. He moved faster than a man his size should be able to, tackling me to the floor as something whizzed over our heads and embedded itself in the far wall. Stay down. He was already on his phone. This is Washington. We have contact at the primary residence. Request immediate extraction and cleanup. My ears were ringing from the impact. Marcus army crawled to the wall, reached up and pulled something free. A crossbow bolt, its tip gleaming with some kind of coating. Poison, he said matter-of-factly. Probably succinylcholine. Causes paralysis, then death. Makes it look like a heart attack. Someone just tried to kill me. The words came out strangled. Someone just tried to make you disappear quietly. Big difference. He helped me to my feet, keeping us both below window level. We're leaving. Now. I threw clothes toiletries and my laptop into a duffel bag, hands shaking. The USB drive went into my pocket where it had lived since Eleanor gave it to me. Marcus made another call, speaking in short, coded phrases. We left through the building's service entrance where a black SUV waited with the engine running. Marcus bundled me into the back, then slid behind the wheel. We were moving before I'd even fastened my seatbelt. Where are we going? Safe house. Former student of yours owns it, actually. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Tommy Chen took your AP history class about 8 years ago. Tommy, but he's a Navy SEAL now, yeah. Just like me. Turns out you inspired more than one of us to serve our country, Mr. P. The use of my classroom nickname made me look closer. Behind the professional facade, something familiar sparked. Marcus Washington from third period. You sat in the back row, wrote that paper on the Buffalo Soldiers that made me cry. A smile cracked his serious expression. You gave me an A+ and wrote, "Find your voice and use it to change the world." I figured protecting good people from bad ones was a start. But how did Eleanor find you? She didn't. I found her. We turned onto Lakeshore Drive, the city lights blurring past. When Tommy told me someone was asking around about protection for you, I volunteered. Couldn't let anything happen to the teacher who changed my life. I just taught history, Marcus. No, sir. You taught us to think, to question, to stand up for what's right even when it costs us. His hands tightened on the wheel. Speaking of which, you need to know what you're really up against. We pulled into an underground garage in Lincoln Park. Marcus led me through a series of security doors to a furnished apartment that looked like any other, except for the reinforced windows and multiple security monitors. Sit, he said, gesturing to the couch. We need to talk about your son. Bradley's angry, but he wouldn't. The attack tonight. That wasn't anger. That was a professional hit, probably ordered this afternoon after the will reading. Marcus pulled out a tablet, showed me a photo. This man entered your building at 4:17 today. Alexei Volkov, former Spetsnaz, now freelance, specializes in making problems disappear. You're saying Bradley hired an assassin. I'm saying someone with access to Celestial Pharmaceutical's black budget accounts hired an assassin. Your son has had that access for 2 years. The room spun. No, Bradley might be greedy, ambitious even, but he's not a killer. Neither was Eleanor until she was. The tablet showed more photos. My apartment building from various angles, timestamps going back days. They've been watching you planning this. The will reading just accelerated their timeline. A knock at the door made me jump. Marcus raised a hand, checked a monitor. It's okay, someone you need to meet. He opened the door to reveal the man I'd seen at the hospital. Thomas Brennan looked older up close, weathered by years of seeing humanity's worst sides. Mr. Patterson. He entered carrying a banker's box. Glad Marcus got you out in time. You're the private investigator Eleanor hired. Among other things. He set the box on the coffee table. Eleanor hired me 2 years ago to investigate irregularities in Celestial's clinical trials. What I found went way beyond bad science. He pulled out file after file, spreading them across the table. Photos, documents, transcripts. Your son has been running a shadow operation within Celestial. Off-the-books trials in Eastern Europe using homeless populations. When subjects died, they were cremated as unclaimed bodies. No records, no investigations. I stared at a photo of Bradley shaking hands with a man in a lab coat, both smiling over what looked like a contract. That's Dr. Yuri Kozlov, Thomas continued. He ran Joseph Mengele-style experiments in Soviet psychiatric hospitals. Your son hired him to accelerate drug trials by ignoring safety protocols. This can't be real. It gets worse. Thomas pulled out an audio recorder. Eleanor started recording conversations 6 months ago when she began to suspect. This is from a board meeting last month. Bradley's voice filled the room, cold and articulate. The Phase 3 delays are unacceptable. If we need to adjust the data to show efficacy, then adjust it. The FDA only sees what we show them. As for the test subjects in Belarus, double their compensation. Dead men can't file lawsuits. Laughter followed. Multiple voices agreeing, suggesting even more aggressive tactics. Eleanor was going to expose this herself, Thomas said quietly. Then she got sick. Pancreatic cancer, supposedly, but the type she had 90% survival rate with early detection. She should have lived. What are you saying? I'm saying her medical records show she had blood work done just 2 months before diagnosis. Clean. Then suddenly stage 4 cancer. I've seen 3 other Celestial executives die the same way after developing consciences. You think Bradley? I think your son learned everything Eleanor taught him, and then improved on it. Thomas pulled out another file. He's been systematically eliminating anyone who might testify against Celestial. 17 potential witnesses have died in the last 18 months. Accidents, suicides, sudden illnesses. I thought I might be sick. He killed his own mother. We can't prove it, yet. But Eleanor believed it. It's why she changed her will, why she hired protection for you. Thomas leaned back. She knew exposing Celestial would put a target on your back. She also knew you were probably the only person with the moral courage to do it anyway. Marcus spoke up from his position by the window. There's something else, Mr. P. Someone's been feeding information to the FBI about Celestial. High-level intel, the kind only a board member would have. We think it's someone on the inside, someone close to Bradley. Who? We're not sure, but whoever it is has been building a case for months. Your evidence could be the final piece they need. Marcus turned from the window. If you're willing to risk it. I looked at the evidence spread before me. Photos of Bradley I didn't recognize, transcripts of conversations that sounded like a stranger speaking financial records, showing millions funneled to offshore accounts. What Eleanor gave me the USB drive, it has all this. More, Thomas confirmed. Names, dates, account numbers. Everything needed to bring down Celestial and everyone involved. Including my son. Especially your son. Thomas's voice was gentle but firm. He's not the boy you raised anymore, Mr. Patterson. That person is gone if he ever really existed after Eleanor got her hooks in him. I stood, walked to the reinforced window overlooking Lincoln Park. Somewhere out there, my son was planning my death. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike, who'd cried in my arms when his goldfish died, who'd written me Father's Day cards with crayon hearts. If I do this, if I turn over the evidence, what happens to Bradley? Best case, 25 to life in federal prison. Worst case. Thomas shrugged. The other board members might decide he's a liability. Your son has made a lot of enemies, Mr. Patterson. Not all of them believe in due process. So my choices are let my son continue killing innocent people or sign his death warrant. Your choice, Marcus said softly, is whether those families who lost loved ones to Celestial's drugs get justice. Everything else is just consequences. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against Marcus's protests, I answered. Hello, Dad? Bradley's voice was calm, conversational. I heard you had some excitement tonight. That's what happens when you involve yourself in matters beyond your understanding. Bradley, we need to talk. We really don't. You have something I want. I have the resources to take it. This can be easy or hard, but the outcome won't change. He paused. That USB drive Mom gave you, I know you have it. Give it to me, sign away your claim to the estate, and you can go back to your little life. Keep it, and well, Alexei was just the first. I have deeper pockets and fewer scruples than you can imagine. You've become a monster, I said quietly. I've become a success. Mom taught me that monsters are just people willing to do what others won't. Speaking of which, how's your neighbor, Mrs. Chen Sweet Lady? It would be a shame if she had an accident. If you touch her, then give me what I want. You have 24 hours. After that, everyone you care about becomes a liability. Your students, your colleagues, that waitress at Giuseppe's you always flirt with. I know them all, Dad. Mom taught me to do my homework. The line went dead. Marcus was already on his phone arranging protection for everyone I knew. Thomas gathered his files preparing for whatever came next. And I stood at the window, USB drive burning in my pocket, wondering how much innocence I'd have to sacrifice to save the innocent. 24 hours. Bradley had given me 24 hours to choose between justice and everyone I loved. Eleanor's last message echoed in my mind. The truth will set you free, but first it will destroy everything you think you know. She was right. The truth was destroying everything. The question now was whether anything would be left to rebuild when the destruction was done. The idea came to me at 4 a.m, staring at the ceiling of the safe house bedroom. Eleanor had always said I was too trusting, too willing to believe the best in people. Maybe it was time to use that reputation to my advantage. You want to do what… Marcus set down his coffee hard enough to slosh liquid onto Thomas's files. I want to meet Bradley. Give him what he wants. I held up a hand before they could protest. Or at least let him think I am. Thomas leaned back in his chair, studying me with those investigator eyes. You want to run a con on your own son. I want to save my son. There's a difference. I pulled out the USB drive Eleanor had given me. This contains enough evidence to destroy Celestial, but it also has something else. Eleanor's personal files, photos of Bradley as a child, videos of birthday parties, letters she never sent him. Reminders of who he used to be. You think nostalgia will stop him from killing you? Marcus shook his head. Mr. P, with all due respect, this isn't one of your history lessons where everyone learns from the past. Maybe not. But Eleanor chose her words carefully in that video. She said Bradley could still be saved from becoming irredeemably lost. That means she believed there was still something in him worth saving. Or she was a dying woman desperate to believe her son wasn't a complete monster, Thomas countered. Either way, I have to try. I moved to the window, watching dawn break over Lake Park. But I'm not stupid. We do this my way with precautions. Over the next 6 hours, we planned. Thomas would coordinate with his FBI contact, someone he'd codenamed Bishop, who'd been feeding them information from inside Celestial. Marcus would arrange tactical support, calling in favors from former military contacts. And I would play the role of the defeated father, ready to surrender. The meeting was set for Eleanor's estate in Lake Forest that night. Bradley had insisted on home turf, probably planning to kill me and dump my body in Lake Michigan. The mansion where we'd once celebrated Christmas as a family would now be our battleground. I arrived at 8 p.m., driving my old Honda, wearing the same dated suit from the will reading. Marcus and his team were already in position, though you'd never know it. To anyone watching, I looked exactly like what Bradley expected a broken teacher in over his head. The gates opened automatically. As I drove up the winding driveway, memories flooded back. Teaching Bradley to ride his bike on this very pavement. Eleanor and I hosting faculty parties on the lawn. The last Christmas we'd spent together before everything fell apart. Bradley waited on the front steps, backlit by the mansion's lights. He'd dressed casually, jeans and a sweater, as if murder was just another item on his evening agenda. "Dad." He didn't move to greet me. "I'm glad you came to your senses." "I'm tired, Bradley." I climbed the steps slowly, letting my shoulders slump. Too tired to fight anymore. Something flickered in his eyes. Disappointment had he wanted more resistance. "Come in, we have documents to sign." The house felt like a museum preserved exactly as Eleanor had left it. The same paintings, the same furniture, even the same scent of her favorite candles. Bradley led me to the study, where Eleanor had conducted her business, where she'd made the deals that built her fortune and destroyed her soul. "A drink." He moved to the bar, pouring himself scotch. "Water's fine." Still the teetotaler. He handed me a glass, which I pretended to sip. Marcus had warned me about poisoning possibilities. "You know, that always annoyed Mom. Said it made you seem morally superior." "I just never acquired the taste." "You never acquired a taste for anything expensive." Bradley settled behind Eleanor's desk, looking eerily like her. "Which is why this is better for everyone. You wouldn't know what to do with $42 million. "You're right." I reached into my jacket. "Here's what you want." I placed the USB drive on the desk between us. Bradley stared at it like it might bite him. "That's it. No conditions, no final appeals to my better nature. Would they work?" "No." He picked up the drive, examining it. "But I expected you to try. You always were predictable." "I've been thinking about your mother's funeral," I said, changing tactics. "You handled all the arrangements. I never got to say goodbye." "She didn't want you there." But his voice lacked conviction. "Did she say that, or did you decide for her?" Bradley's jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" "It does to me." I pulled out my phone, knowing Marcus was recording everything. "I found something today, while I was packing." I showed him a photo on my phone. 3-year-old Bradley on my shoulders, Eleanor laughing beside us, all of us, covered in flour from a failed attempt at making cookies. "Remember that you wanted to make chocolate chip cookies for your preschool class? The kitchen looked like a bakery had exploded." "That was a long time ago." But he leaned forward, studying the image. I swiped to another photo. Bradley at 8, dressed as Abraham Lincoln for a school play I'd helped him rehearse. "You forgot your lines halfway through and started improvising. Told the audience that Lincoln would have wanted everyone to have ice cream for breakfast. The principal was horrified. Your mother and I couldn't stop laughing." "Stop it." Bradley pushed the phone away. "One more." I swiped again. This time a video. Bradley at 13, the day before Eleanor left, teaching his little league team a special handshake he'd invented. His younger voice filled the room. "Okay, guys, this is going to be our secret weapon. Every time someone gets a hit, we do this. It means we're a team no matter what." "I said stop!" Bradley slammed his hand on the desk. That boy believed in loyalty, in doing the right thing. What happened to him? He grew up. He learned how the world really works. Bradley stood pacing to the window. "Mom taught me that kindness is weakness, that winners take what they want." "And you believed her, the woman who abandoned you." "She came back for me." "No, Bradley. She came back for an heir. Someone to mold into her image." I stood too, moving closer. And when she realized what she'd created, it horrified her so much she changed her will. "Shut up!" She told me that day at the hospital. She said corrupting you was her greatest regret. I said, "Shut up." Bradley spun, and I saw the gun in his hand. "You think showing me old pictures changes anything? You think I care about who I used to be? I think you care more than you want to admit." I kept my voice calm, though my heart was racing. "Otherwise, why meet here? Why not just have your assassin finish the job?" "Because I wanted to see your face when you realized you'd lost. I wanted you to know that Mom chose me in the end. She chose Justice Bradley, and deep down past all the anger and greed, part of you knows that was right. There is no justice." The gun shook in his hand. There's only power and those too weak to take it. Mom understood that. Then why did she spend her last days gathering evidence against the company she built? Why hire investigators? Why change her will? I took a step closer. Because she remembered who she used to be before the money corrupted her, just like you remember who you used to be. Stop talking. That boy with the special handshake who believed in teams and loyalty, he's still in there. Eleanor saw it. That's why she gave me this task, not to destroy you, but to save you. Save me. Bradley laughed, high and unstable. I'm about to inherit $42 million. I run a pharmaceutical empire. I have everything. You have nothing. No real friends, no one who loves you for who you are. Even Cynthia, ask yourself, would she stay if the money disappeared? That won't happen. It already has. I pulled out a second USB drive. The one I gave you, it has the evidence, yes. But not all of it. This one has the rest, including recordings Eleanor made of you discussing the murders, the cover-ups, even your plans to kill her. Bradley went very still. You're lying! Am I? Your mother was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. She knew you'd turned on her. The cancer diagnosis just accelerated her timeline. She was sick, with a treatable form of cancer that suddenly became terminal after you started overseeing her medical care. I watched the truth hit him like a physical blow. She knew Bradley. A mother always knows. The gun wavered. I didn't. It wasn't supposed to. Kill her, or just incapacitate her long enough for you to take control. I moved closer. What did you use? Something from Celestial's labs. Something untraceable. Stop! She loved you anyway. That's the tragedy of it. Even knowing what you'd done, she loved you enough to try to save you. By destroying everything I've built? By giving you a chance to choose differently. I held out the second USB. This has everything, including evidence that could either convict you or exonerate you depending on what you do next. Bradley stared at the drive, then at me. What are you talking about? Your FBI contact, Cynthia. She's been building a case, but she needs someone on the inside to testify. Someone who knows where all the bodies are buried. I set the USB on the desk. You could be that someone. Turnstate's evidence helped bring down the real monsters at Celestial. You'd do time, yes, but not life. And more importantly, you'd be the man your mother hoped you could become. You want me to betray everyone? I want you to stop being everyone's betrayer. I thought of all the families who'd lost loved ones, all the victims of Celestial's greed. For once in your life, Bradley, do the right thing because it's right, not because it profits you. The gun lowered slightly. They'll kill me. The board, the investors, they have resources. So do I, or rather, so do we. I gestured to the window. Marcus, you can come in now. The door opened, and Marcus entered, followed by 3 other men in tactical gear. Bradley raised the gun again, but half-heartedly. Former students of mine, I explained. All military, all here to protect us. Because that's what good people do, Bradley. They protect each other. And Cynthia. Agent Sarah Coleman, FBI. The woman herself entered, having shed the party girl persona for professional steel. Hello, Bradley. We have a lot to talk about. Bradley looked around the room, calculating odds that weren't in his favor. You planned all this. With help from your mother, actually. Thomas Brennan appeared last. She knew you'd threaten your father, knew you'd demand a meeting. She counted on your arrogance. And my belief in you, I added. She knew I'd never give up on my son. Bradley sank into Eleanor's chair, the gun falling from limp fingers. I killed her. I killed my own mother. Yes, I said simply. But you can honor her memory by stopping the killing, by being the man she wanted you to be before she lost her way. It's too late. It's never too late while you're still breathing. I moved around the desk, placed my hands on his shoulders. You're my son. You did terrible things, but you're still my son. Let me help you find your way back. Bradley looked up at me, And for the first time in years, I saw the boy I'd raised. Scared, lost, desperate for approval. "I don't know how," he whispered. "Start by telling the truth, all of it. Agent Coleman will help you navigate the legal parts. Marcus will keep you safe, and I'll be here every step of the way." "Why?" His voice broke. "After everything I've done, why would you help me?" "Because that's what fathers do. We love our children even when they break our hearts. We fight for them even when they fight against us. We never ever give up hope." Bradley crumbled, then sobbing like the child he'd never really stopped being. I held him while he cried, while Agent Coleman read him his rights, while the empire Eleanor had built prepared to fall. Outside Lake Michigan stretched endlessly under the stars. Somewhere in the darkness, families grieved for loved ones killed by Celestial's greed. Justice wouldn't bring them back, but it might save others. And maybe it would save my son's soul. The trap had worked, but not the way any of us expected. In trying to catch Bradley, we'd caught something more precious, a glimpse of his humanity, battered and buried, but still breathing. Now came the hard part, keeping it alive through what came next. The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago had never seen a media circus quite like this. Reporters lined the steps like hungry wolves, shouting questions at anyone who looked remotely connected to the case. The pharmaceutical trial of the century, they called it. I called it my son's last chance at redemption. 3 months had passed since that night at Eleanor's mansion. 3 months of Bradley in protective custody, slowly unraveling the web of corruption he'd helped weave. 3 months of death threats, bribe attempts, and pressure from Celestial's board that would have broken a weaker man. But Bradley held firm, and I began to see glimpses of the boy I'd raised. Mr. Patterson. A reporter shoved a microphone in my face as Marcus guided me through the crowd. "How does it feel to know your son is testifying against his own company?" "No comment," Marcus said, using his bulk to clear a path. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was electric. The gallery was packed with families of victims, Celestial executives, and federal agents. I took my seat in the row reserved for family, nodding to Agent Coleman, who was seated with the prosecution team. Bradley entered in a charcoal suit, looking older than his 28 years. The past months had carved lines in his face, turned his easy smile into something harder won. But his spine was straight, his head high. He looked like a man facing his demons instead of running from them. "State your name for the record," the prosecutor began. "Bradley Thomas Henderson." "Mr. Henderson, you were an executive at Celestial Pharmaceuticals. I was Senior Vice President of Strategic Development." Bradley's voice was steady, which was a polite way of saying I managed the company's illegal activities. A murmur ran through the gallery. The defense attorney objected, but the judge overruled. For the next 4 hours, Bradley laid bare Celestial's crimes. He named names, provided dates, explained the intricate system of shell companies and offshore accounts used to hide profits from deadly drugs. He talked about Project Serenity, about the falsified trials, about the witnesses who'd been silenced. "Mr. Henderson," the prosecutor said, "you've testified about numerous criminal acts. Were you merely following orders?" "No." Bradley looked directly at the jury. "I was an enthusiastic participant. I suggested new ways to hide data. I personally oversaw the bribing of FDA officials. I recruited doctors to falsify patient records. Why? Because I was greedy. Because I wanted power. Because my mother taught me that success meant taking what you wanted regardless of the cost." He paused. "And because I was a coward who chose easy money over hard truths." The defense attorney rose for cross-examination, a shark-smelling blood. "Mr. Henderson, isn't it true? You're testifying to save yourself that you've made a deal for a reduced sentence." "Yes." "So why should the jury believe anything you say?" Bradley was quiet for a moment. Then he looked at me. "Because my father taught me that eventually you have to stand for something. It took me too long to remember that lesson, but I'm remembering it now. The cross-examination was brutal. The defense brought up Bradley's lavish lifestyle, his callous emails, his participation in covering up deaths. They painted him as a monster trying to save his own skin. And Bradley took it all, admitting to every terrible thing he'd done. "You killed your own mother, didn't you?" the defense attorney asked, going for the jugular. The courtroom went silent. This wasn't part of the official charges, but everyone knew the rumors. Bradley's composure finally cracked. "I gave her medication that accelerated her cancer. I told myself it was mercy that she was dying anyway. But yes, I killed her." Gasps echoed through the gallery. The judge called for order. "No further questions?" the defense attorney said, satisfied he'd destroyed Bradley's credibility. But the prosecutor wasn't done. On redirect, she asked Bradley one simple question. "Why admit to something you weren't charged with?" "Because my mother died believing I was irredeemable. The least I can do is prove her wrong by telling the complete truth." That's when Richard Dalton took the stand. I'd known Richard was Eleanor's spy, but I hadn't known the full extent of his involvement. He was Bradley's assistant, yes, but also Eleanor's illegitimate son from an affair 20 years ago. My stepson, though, Eleanor had never told me. "She contacted me 5 years ago," Richard testified. "Offered to pay for my mother's cancer treatment if I'd work for her, not just as Bradley's assistant, but as her eyes and ears inside the company." Richard produced recordings, documents, evidence that corroborated everything Bradley had said and more. He revealed a conspiracy that went beyond Celestial to include politicians, regulatory officials, even judges. "Ms. Henderson knew she was dying," Richard said. "She knew Bradley had poisoned her, but she used her remaining time to gather evidence to set up a scenario where the truth would come out." "Why didn't she go to the authorities herself?" the prosecutor asked. "Because she needed Bradley to confess. She knew the company would blame everything on her after she died, paint her as a rogue executive. Only Bradley knew enough to bring them all down. She manipulated events to force him to choose between wealth and truth." "Manipulated how?" Richard smiled sadly. "The will Mr. Patterson's involvement, even hiring Marcus Washington. She knew Melvin would never give up on Bradley. She counted on a father's love to do what her mother's love couldn't accomplish alone." The revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Eleanor hadn't just changed her will to punish Bradley. She'd orchestrated an elaborate trap to save him from himself, using me as the bait and his own greed as the spring. Marcus testified next, revealing the assassination attempts, the threats, the lengths Celestial had gone to silence us. He played recordings of board members discussing my murder planning to frame Bradley for it, once they had the evidence back. "They never cared about Mr. Henderson," Marcus stated. "He was useful while he was loyal. The moment he became a liability, they marked him for death just like his mother." But the most damning testimony came from Agent Coleman. She revealed that she'd been undercover for 3 years, that Bradley had tried to seduce her to gain an ally, that she'd watched him order the deaths of 17 witnesses. "Yet you believe he's telling the truth now?" the prosecutor asked. "I do. I've seen many criminals try to save themselves. Most minimize their crimes, shift blame, claim ignorance. Bradley Henderson has done none of that. He's confessed to crimes we didn't even know about." The trial continued for 2 weeks. Witness after witness, document after document, building an airtight case against Celestial Pharmaceuticals. And through it all, Bradley testified with unwavering honesty about his role in the conspiracy. On the final day, the prosecutor asked Bradley one last question. "What do you want the jury to know?" Bradley looked at the gallery, at the families who'd lost loved ones, at the executives who'd participated in the killing, at me. "I want them to know that I'm guilty, that I chose money over morality, power over people, that I killed my own mother because she threatened my ambition. I deserve whatever sentence I receive." He paused. "But I also want them to know that people can change, that even the worst of us can choose to do better. My mother believed that. My father never stopped believing it. The evidence I've provided will save lives. That doesn't erase my crimes, but maybe it starts to balance the scales." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, They found all 23 Celestial executives guilty on all counts. The company would be dissolved, its assets used to compensate victims. Those responsible would spend decades in prison. Bradley was sentenced separately, 25 years with the possibility of parole in 15. It was less than he deserved, but more than the 5 years his plea deal had promised. The judge said Bradley's complete honesty and the lives his testimony would save warranted mercy, but his crimes still demanded justice. As they led him away, Bradley stopped beside me. "I'm sorry," he said simply, "for everything." "I know." I gripped his shoulder. "I'll be here when you get out." Still not giving up on me. "Never. That's what fathers do." He managed a small smile. "Tell Marcus thanks for keeping us both alive. And Dad used Mom's money to help people. Build something good from all this bad." Then he was gone, led away to begin paying for his crimes. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited with their questions. This time I stopped. "Mr. Patterson, how do you feel about your son's sentence?" I looked into the cameras, thinking of all the families watching, all the victims of corporate greed who'd never see justice. "I feel proud," I said. "My son did terrible things, but today he stood up and told the truth. He chose justice over wealth, honesty over self-preservation. Eleanor was right. He could still be saved. And maybe his example will save others from making the same choices." "What will you do now?" What Eleanor asked. "Use her fortune to help victims of pharmaceutical fraud. Create safeguards to prevent this from happening again. And visit my son every week because redemption is a process, not a moment." As Marcus drove me away from the courthouse, I thought about reversals. How Eleanor's death had reversed Bradley's fortune. How Bradley's testimony had reversed Celestial's power. How a father's faith had reversed a son's fall. The truth had indeed destroyed everything I thought I knew. But from that destruction, something new was being built. Something better. Something worth the price we'd all paid. The reversal was complete. Now came the harder task of moving forward. 5 years later, I stood in the memorial garden of the Eleanor Patterson Foundation, watching the sunrise paint Lake Michigan in shades of gold and amber. The inscription on the central monument read, "In memory of those lost to corporate greed, in hope of those who choose truth over profit." 843 names were etched in the black granite, victims of Celestial Pharmaceuticals crimes. Each name represented a family destroyed, a life cut short for profit margins. But now each name also represented a life saved by the Foundation's work. "The senators are here, Mr. P." Marcus approached, still my security chief, despite my protests that I no longer needed protection. "Ready for your testimony." Today was the 5th anniversary of the trial, and Congress was voting on the Henderson Act legislation that would revolutionize pharmaceutical oversight. If passed, it would require independent testing of all new drugs, create severe criminal penalties for data falsification, and establish a victims' compensation fund financed by the industry itself. "As ready as one can be to face politicians," I said, adjusting my tie. "Still not comfortable in suits even after all these years." "Bradley would be proud," Marcus said quietly. "Bradley. My son was 10 years into his 25-year sentence, transferred last month to a minimum security facility due to good behavior and his continued cooperation with federal investigators. He'd become something of a legend in the system, teaching financial literacy to other inmates, helping them prepare for life after prison. His letters came weekly, filled with reflections on the books I sent, updates on his studies. He was earning a degree in social work, and carefully worded questions about the Foundation's work. He never asked for forgiveness. He said he was still earning it. "Mr. Patterson." A young woman approached nervously. "I'm Jennifer Walsh. From Northwestern, you saved my father's life." I recognized the name. Her father had been prescribed Serenity for anxiety. Thanks to our Foundation's awareness campaign, his doctor had caught the signs of heart damage early. Your father saved his own life by listening to his body, I said. We just provided information. You provided truth. She pressed an envelope into my hands. He wanted you to have this. It's not much, but inside was a check for $50 and a note for coffee. Pass it on. After she left, I walked through the foundation offices still housed in Eleanor's Lake Forest mansion. We'd converted the ballroom into a research library, the dining room into a conference center, the bedrooms into offices for the 53 employees who now worked to protect consumers from pharmaceutical fraud. Richard Dalton met me in what had been Eleanor's study. As the foundation's CEO, he'd proven brilliant at navigating corporate politics while maintaining absolute integrity. Eleanor would have been proud of both her sons. The European offices are operational, he reported. We've already identified 3 drugs that need investigation. Also, the Times wants to do a feature on the Foundation's 5th anniversary. Let them talk to the families we've helped, not me. You can't stay in the shadows forever, Melvin. You're the face of holding power accountable. I'm a history teacher who got caught up in history, nothing more. Richard smiled. We both know that's not true. By the way, something came for you. He handed me a package with no return address. Inside was a worn baseball and a note in Bradley's handwriting. Found this in my cell. Previous occupant left it. Made me remember that day you taught me to throw a curveball. Still can't get the spin right. Maybe you can show me again someday. B. I turned the ball over in my hands, remembering that afternoon in Grant Park, Bradley determined to master the pitch before his Little League tryouts. We'd practiced for hours, him getting increasingly frustrated me patiently, demonstrating the grip again and again. When he finally threw a perfect curve, his joy had lit up the entire field. Someday, I whispered. The drive to Washington took all day. I could have flown, but I needed time to think about what I'd say to Congress. How do you condense 5 years of fighting pharmaceutical fraud into compelling testimony? How do you make politicians care about victims they've never met? In the end, I decided on simplicity. Senators. I began facing the committee the next morning. 5 years ago, my ex-wife died of cancer accelerated by medications my son gave her. She was a pharmaceutical executive who'd built her fortune on lies that killed hundreds. My son followed in her footsteps until the weight of his crimes broke him. This could be a unique tragedy, but it's not. It's happening right now in boardrooms across America. The only unique part is that we caught them. I talked about the Foundation's work, about the 17 new prosecutions we'd helped initiate, about the 3,000 lives saved by our drug interaction warnings. But mostly I talked about redemption. My son is in prison where he belongs. But he's also teaching fellow inmates to read financial statements, so they won't be cheated when they're released. He's counseling young offenders about the choices that led him astray. He's proof that even the worst mistakes don't have to define us forever. Senator Harrison, who'd opposed the legislation, interrupted. Mr. Patterson, your son killed his own mother. Why should we listen to anything he has to say? Because he's living proof of what happens when we prioritize profit over people. Because he's willing to spend the rest of his life trying to atone. And because dismissing the guilty means we learn nothing from their crimes. You're asking us to regulate an entire industry based on one bad company. I'm asking you to protect American families from the next celestial pharmaceuticals, to ensure no other father has to watch his son become a monster in pursuit of money, to declare that in America, medicine should heal, not kill for profit. The hearing continued for hours. I answered their questions, provided documentation, shared stories of families destroyed and saved. When it ended, I had no idea if I'd changed any minds. The vote was scheduled for the next day. That evening, I sat in my hotel room watching the news debate the bill's chances. The pharmaceutical lobby had spent millions opposing it, running ads about stifled innovation and job losses. We'd countered with victim testimonials, but money talked louder than grief in Washington. My phone rang. The prison number made my heart race. Bradley was only allowed to call once a month, and he'd called last week. Dad. His voice was strained. I saw your testimony on C-SPAN. They let us watch in the library. How are you, son? Proud. Proud of you for fighting. Proud of the foundation. Proud to be your son, even if I don't deserve it. Bradley. Listen, I don't have long. Some of the guys here, their families were victims of Celestial. They wanted me to tell you thank you for not giving up, for making our crimes mean something. You're making them mean something. Every life you touch in there, every young man you steer away from easy money, that's your mother's legacy too. I dream about her sometimes. His voice dropped. She's at the kitchen table in our old house making those terrible pancakes she used to burn. She smiles and says she forgives me. Then I wake up and remember what I did. Forgiveness isn't just a dream, Bradley. It's a choice, one we make every day. The guard's signaling. I have to go, Dad. Whatever happens with the vote, you've already won. You've shown that truth matters, that fathers don't give up on their sons. That's worth more than any legislation. The line went dead. I sat, holding the phone, thinking about forgiveness, justice, and the price of both. The next morning I watched from the Senate gallery as they debated. Senator after senator rose, some supporting, others opposing. The pharmaceutical lobby had done their work well. As the vote neared, it looked like we'd lose. Then Senator Williams, who'd been undecided, asked to speak. I received a call last night, she began. From an inmate at Otisville Federal Prison, a young man who'd helped kill hundreds, including his own mother. He begged me to vote for this bill, said he couldn't undo his crimes, but maybe Congress could prevent future ones. He said his father had taught him that democracy means citizens standing up for what's right, even when it costs them everything. She paused, looking directly at me. If a convicted killer can find the courage to do right, can we do less? The vote was closer than anyone predicted. 51 to 49. The Henderson Act passed. In the celebration that followed, reporters asked me for comments. I gave them sound bites about justice and progress. But my thoughts were with Bradley alone in his cell, learning that his voice had mattered. That even from prison, he'd helped save lives. 6 months later, I stood in that same cell for the first time. Bradley had earned supervised visits for his cooperation with ongoing investigations. He looked older, grays threading through his hair, but his eyes were clear. It's not much, he said, gesturing at the narrow space. But I've got books, paper to write on, and time to think. It's enough, I said. We talked for 2 hours about the foundation, the new laws, the future. As the visit ended, Bradley pulled out a folder. I've been writing, he said shyly. A book about how I got here, what warning signs I ignored, how greed corrupted me inch by inch. Thought maybe it could help business students avoid my path. I flipped through pages of neat handwriting, chapter titles like The First Compromise and When Ambition Becomes Poison. It's good, I said. Important. The foundation will help you publish it. All proceeds to the victims' fund, he said quickly. I won't profit from my crimes. I know. We embraced briefly the first physical contact in 5 years. He felt smaller than I remembered, or maybe I'd just stopped seeing him as the larger-than-life villain he'd become in my nightmares. 10 more years minimum, he said as the guard signaled time was up. Think you'll still be around? I'll be here, I promised. Every visiting day, every parole hearing, every step of the way back. Still not giving up? Never. That's what fathers do. As I drove home through the countryside, past pharmaceutical companies and hospitals, past courthouses and schools, I thought about Eleanor's will. $5 for our first coffee. $42 million for our last chance. She'd known exactly what she was doing. The money had been bait, but not for Bradley. For me. She'd known I'd never fight just for wealth, but I'd fight forever for my son. In manipulating us both, she'd given us the only gift that mattered, the opportunity to choose redemption over revenge, truth over treasure. The Foundation's work continued. Every day brought new challenges, new victories, new reminders of why we fought. But for me, the real victory was simpler. Every letter from Bradley showed growth. Every conversation revealed more of the boy I'd raised. Every year brought him closer to the man he was meant to be. I pulled into the parking lot of Lincoln Park High School, my old workplace. I'd returned to teaching part-time, sharing the lessons I'd learned about power corruption and the courage to stand against both. My students thought I was just another history teacher with strong opinions about corporate ethics. They had no idea their mild-mannered instructor had brought down a pharmaceutical empire turned $42 million into a force for justice and never gave up on a son the world had written off. But then again, the best teachers rarely talk about themselves. They focus on preparing the next generation to do better than the last, to choose truth over comfort, to fight for justice even when it costs everything. As I prepared my lesson plan for the next day about the Progressive Era and the birth of consumer protection laws, I smiled. History did repeat itself, but sometimes if you were very lucky and very stubborn, you got to help write a better chapter. My phone buzzed. A text from Bradley. Helped another inmate with his appeal today. He has a real chance at early release. Mom would say I'm wasting my talent on convicts. You'd say I'm finding it. Thanks for being right. Love you, Dad. I typed back, love you too, son. See you Sunday. Outside, the sun set over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of hope and possibility. Somewhere, families were sitting down to dinner, safe from medications that might have killed them. Somewhere, executives were thinking twice before falsifying data. Somewhere, a young person was choosing honesty over easy money because they'd heard our story. Eleanor had left me $5 and a chance to save our son. In the end, that was worth more than all the millions in the world. The truth had set us free. First, it had destroyed everything. But from those ashes, we'd built something better. Something worth the pain. Something that would outlast us all. And that I thought, as I locked up the classroom and headed home, was the greatest inheritance of all. Dear friends, this story of truth triumphing over greed has touched many hearts. But I want to ask you, have you ever had to choose between easy money and doing what's right? What would you do if you discovered a loved one was involved in something that hurt innocent people? Would you have the courage to stand up for truth, even if it meant losing everything? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary moral choices. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late for redemption, that truth matters more than money, and that love sometimes means holding people accountable for their actions. Thank you for joining me on this journey from betrayal to redemption. Remember, the most valuable inheritance we can leave our children isn't money. It's the courage to do what's right, even when it costs us everything. Until next time, may you always choose truth over treasure, and may you never give up on the people you love, no matter how far they've fallen.